Man, that made me sound like a nerd. All right. On June 23rd last year, the United Kingdom held a popular vote to determine its future and its presence in the modern world. The EU referendum, commonly known as Brexit, had not only the highest turnout the country had ever seen in a public vote, but also one of the narrowest splits. The results came down to a near-perfect division of 51.9% in favor of leaving the European Union to 48.1% voting to remain. Most economists, pundits, and experts alike have attributed the main determinant of the vote to the effects of immigration on the national economy. Those in favor of leaving the European Union stressed complaints of immigration taking natives' jobs and hurting the national economy. But was this vote derived from economic articulation, or was it based off of something else? Economic theory and studies conducted since June of last year both predict that removing immigrant labor from the national economy would hinder economic growth. Others believe that the stricter stance on immigration policy will halt cultural diffusion and preserve traditional British ideology. Instead, I put forth that the UK has misinterpreted immigration reform in its choice to leave. I put forth that an increase in immigration to the United Kingdom should lead to an increase in economic growth due to improvements of the labor supply, despite the traditional British sentiment and nationalism. So why did people in the United Kingdom vote against their own rational economic self-interests? I'll explore the differences between the perception and the realities of immigration on a national economy. What's actually determined the vote against EU membership, and what will the referendum's impact be? Are these pro-leave votes and values really unique? I'll further explore some interesting similarities outside the United Kingdom's borders, particularly close to home. England prospered during the age of industrialism, but the global dynamic economy has shifted and the demand for low-skilled labor has decreased and moved outside of the country. The 1990s reform of migration policy made it easier for migrants outside of the European Economic Area, this one, to move and work inside the EU, and immigration trends increased to higher rates in 2004 with the inclusion of the A8 Eastern European countries. And the United Kingdom was only one of 3 countries to grant this free movement, the others being Spain and Germany. Immigration rates remained high up until the Brexit vote. High immigration rates were accompanied with strong periods of economic growth until the financial crisis of 2008. And looking into this intersection of the UK's prosperous decades and the unprecedentedly high immigration rates is necessary for looking into the economic consequences of immigration reform. The deindustrialization of the United Kingdom resulted in the closure of mining and manufacturing, meaning a loss of high-paid working-class jobs. An influx of low-cost manufactured goods from Asia contributed to the closure of textile mills, steel production, and the automobile industry. The popular response was embedded in exclusionary Englishness and nostalgic reminiscence of the bygone British Empire to cope with this newfound economic insecurity. This had a serious political impact, giving the United Kingdom Independence Party, or UKIP, serious footing in white working-class towns. UKIP began to preach against the dangers of immigration. Current economic models suggest that a slight negative impact from immigration there might be a slight negative impact from immigration on the native employment force. Immigration would only lower the wages for workers considered to be perfect substitutes of the new workforce. Wages for native workers whose skills complement the immigrant workers will increase, and as profits increase, employers benefit from complementary labor growth. The economy will benefit from this further immigration increase. And these benefits are distributed evenly across society, showing that natives continue to benefit from an increase in innovation. The United Kingdom has a minimum standard living wage, so wages cannot fall below a certain point for the lower distribution of wages, which can cause employment changes in the short run. However, the supply of labor leads to an increase in aggregate demand due to an increase in services, culminating in an increased demand for that labor. In summary, wages won't fall as population size increases. Over time, the labor market should bounce back from this increase and reach a new equilibrium of higher employment and higher wages. This response is indicative of the short run and could provide additional benefits such as information and innovation and transfers of knowledge. So when Brexit goes through, it is reasonable to expect that the European Union will benefit from the labor leaving the United Kingdom. Leave voters claim a larger labor supply inherently puts an increased demand on public services in the United Kingdom. I'd like to distinguish between pure and congestible public goods. Some goods are pure, such as national defense. These will be provided at the same level and cost regardless of the size of the population. This represents an implicit form of savings from the native population as population grows. A congestible good are those that rival in consumption with an assumptively smaller average cost, but does so with an increase in population. From 1995 to 2011, which if you recall were the highest years of immigration rates to the United Kingdom, immigrants from outside the United Kingdom made a total fiscal contribution to the public sector of 4% more than they consumed in services. In contrast, the natives population's contributions only covered 93% of what they received in public services. The fact that this holds true for the years of highest immigration rates is strong evidence that the immigrant population financially contributes more to the public sector than they consume. Furthermore, the incoming immigrant population has proven to be both young and at the beginning of their careers, and thus far from reaching their full economic potential. Most incoming workers travel after receiving a higher education abroad, withdrawing less educational benefits and contributing back more in taxes. Furthermore, most immigrants actually return migrate, spending their later and less productive years in their home countries. So, what did lead to the Brexit vote if the public misunderstood the economic impact of immigration? Why did 53% of the country, of the 73% of the people that voted in the vote in favor of tighter immigration reforms if their concerns were of economic prosperity? I attended a conference to hear Professor Chris Brown of the London School of Economics attribute the Leave vote to European populism and social values. This conference was held in our wonderful capital, Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of me attending this conference, but you can use your imagination. For the sake of argument, I'll reduce populism to the simplistic definition of ideologies that combine laissez-faire, anti-elitism, and ethnocentrism. The rise of populism and working-class voters feeling as if they have been pushed aside by globalization can explain some of the Leave vote rationality. But what exactly determined a Leave voter? Commonly, the voter demographics are perceived as older citizens formerly employed by that industrial boom that live in non-central regions with a lesser degree of education. However, this perception is purely based off of sketchy anecdotal evidence, not concrete fact. And since the vote occurred less than a year ago, there's no hard evidence on actual British tendencies. But since economists and sociologists are referring to Brexit as a story of personal values, we can investigate those values instead of voter demographics. These personal values may have been prone to this rise of populism, holding traditional British sentiment close to the public's heart. With populist ideologies getting more and more ground in Europe, you'd expect a relationship between their voting tendencies and their social values. And this is partially true. Chatham House, which is an international affairs think tank, polled European countries across the continent to gauge their political opinions on whether or not all Muslim migration to their countries should be terminated, which is an issue we saw in our recent election cycle. And this includes the United Kingdom. Every single country, including the United Kingdom, agreed that this halt of immigration should be implemented. You'd expect these individuals with similar populist values to also support our president. Well, instead, there's a severe disconnect between European stance on Muslim immigration and the European stance on Donald Trump. The most common feelings towards the president, or president-elect at the time, are fear, disappointment, anger, sadness, and frustration. So what could explain the linkage of social values to the vote to leave? This graph shows that the lower the average class population of white British residents, the higher the probability of them that voted to leave the European Union. The horizontal axis is an index that the higher the index, the more likely the working class of the area. The vertical axis is the likelihood that they would vote for Brexit or to leave. So knowing where someone stands on an issue greatly increases the predictiveness on which way they would vote. An example of this importance is knowing where an individual stands on the implementation of death penalty. Supporting the death penalty is a traditionally conservative value in both Europe and the United States and is representative of populist beliefs. This study finds that knowing someone's view on the death penalty is almost just as likely to predict their vote in Brexit as their stances on European integration, which is the source of the vote itself, immigration, which is the foundation of their economic misinterpretation, and their party allegiance to the UK. Another study further examines the importance of populist social values and casting a leave vote. A psychological survey asked both British and American whites about their preference on whether they would rather have their child be considerate or well-behaved. The connection between the two and support for either Brexit or Trump may not be inherently clear. To claim that you would rather have your child be considerate is psychologically representative of liberal social values. And on the other hand, it's that you would rather have your child be well-behaved is psychologically rooted in support for central and authoritarian power, which are at the core of populism. The study finds that if you answered well-behaved, you were universally more likely to support the leave vote or the vote for the election of Donald Trump. These inherent social values that are at their core representative of populist tendencies can be indicators for voter determination across the board. Here's another two strikingly similar graphs. These two graphs show the importance of several issues to an individual's voting tendencies. In the first graphs, the blue bars indicate the vote for Brexit, and in the second graph, the red bars indicate a vote for Donald Trump. In both graphs, the most important issues to these two groups are immigration and the economy in general. But now that we know that these groups voted against their rational economic self-interests for both of these issues, this is largely due to populist social values. So populism is further widening the gap between academic economics and the voting public. And economists, and yes, I'm looking at you, Wheaton Economics Department, take a pledge to condense your findings and your publications to understandable and digestible pieces. And the voters and the public, don't just get your information from Bloomberg or Breitbart, the Financial Times or the Drudge Report, but from multiple sources. Because together, we can work at becoming an informed and discerned society about the economic world that surrounds us. Thank you.